Eliot's appearance today brought to you by Groundworks. Don't let a weak foundation sack your home's value. And don't let all that water that comes in sag your home's value either.
You gotta tell me.
Yeah, schedule a free inspection at groundworks.com. So nice to walk into my basement and know there's not going to be any water.
It really is
there.
the best feeling.
Yeah,
Each time I go down there and I'm like, look at this.
Yeah, I feel
Dry
like
as could be.
I feel like a superhero.
Yeah.
Speaking of superheroes, Eliot, congratulations for making it back here in time
Thank
from
you.
the Nick Sirianni.
Never a doubt.
Nothing will keep me from Tuesdays with Eliot.
By the way, was Nick big timing all of Philadelphia by doing his press conference?
Hour and a half late.
They're running on Super Bowl time now.
Yeah. Like, what are they talking about for that hour and a half?
Yeah, it was a long time.
Yeah.
I didn't think getting here at 3 would be a question when I heard it was at 12:45.
So what did you think about, Ike and I talked briefly about how not only does Nick sound better during press conferences than he did 3 or 4 years ago, but even since the beginning of last season, I feel like he's evolved and exudes a sort of a different way. I guess you don't feel that way.
No, I agree.
Okay.
I think he has. I just don't know if I would say better is the right word. Like I think what makes Nick, one of the things that makes him a good coach is his personality and his willingness to like show emotion, right? It's kind of similar to the sideline debate. Like, I'm fine with how Nick 99% of the time acts on the sideline. I want him doing that. I feel at the podium now, we get such a watered-down version of him. Like, he's up there so afraid, in my opinion, to say something that'll go over the wrong way.
Yes,
right?
yes,
and
awesome.
I don't want that, though.
Awesome.
Like, why should he change who he is? I'm all for self-improvement and, like, if...
Because he's less of a distraction.
But today of all days, like, I'm not today specifically. I just think since they won the Super Bowl, like, it's been a very subdued Nick every time we hear from him.
Good.
But I don't think that is good.
But
I want to see an emotional Nick. I want Nick to be himself. I don't want him to be who people want him to be.
But I think there's two important. There's a difference here. There's a difference between him changing as a person and him acting different in press conferences. And I think if he changed as a person in the locker room, in the building, that would be one thing. But him keeping the part that you like for the team,
right,
and not allowing his press conferences to dictate the narrative of what's going to happen with the Eagles, which is a distraction largely from the team. Like, when you think about all the times the players stuck up for him, they had to stick up for him. And players shouldn't have to stick up for their coach because of what he said or because of what he did. They had to remind us, oh, no, he's a good coach. And that's a distraction,
But
right?
I feel like the having to defend Nick has, for the most part, not been podium, like, come from that. It's been sideline stuff. There was the Flowers comment, but he was proven.
Yeah, that was years ago.
Yeah, and he was also proven, for what it's worth, like, extremely correct about that, right? So I think I get your point. If he's one person at the podium, but he is still the same person he's been for 4 years around the players, that is important, and I get that. But I also do think Nick is a public face of the organization, and I think people like Nick for who he is. And so I think you are right. It is more important he is himself in the locker room, and maybe how he acts at the podium isn't a huge deal. It's disappointing. Like, every time he talks now, it feels like he's subdued.
You know why?
What's wrong with that?
Yeah.
Because that's not who Nick is. Like, that's not the Nick that. And
Well,
I know
he's grown.
But is it for the better? That's my question.
Yes.
They just won the Super Bowl.
I don't know if it is.
Eliot?
Well,
I think it
but I
is.
don't think it's because of the podium.
Well, no. I think here's what I think. I understand what you're saying. I'm poking at you a little bit.
No, I know it is Tuesday.
But I understand where you're coming from. I'm just saying I can appreciate some of the dialing it back, toning down a little bit of the emotions on the sleeves. It's really a balancing act, right?
Yeah.
When you bring it out versus when you don't bring it out, and knowing when to do that. That's what I think he's gotten better at. Because to your point, like, his players last year, we talked to Brandon. I think, hell, even Jordan might have said this to us as well, that they had to tell him, like, dude, you ain't being yourself.
Yes, at the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
And I understand that. So I understand where the players sort of want him to be himself. My only thing is that, and this is why I give him credit, because I don't think it's as simple as me saying don't do it or you saying go ahead and be yourself. I think there's an area where he has to manage when to do it, how much to do it versus not doing it. And, like, he has to manage that. And I think he's doing a great job of it. I really do.
I also don't think you can separate totally the sideline and the press conference. I think, like, he he has to compartmentalize those things, it seems like. When he is in public view, he is at one Nick. When he's not in public view, he's another Nick. And I think, like, and I'm not even talking about the bragging sort of chest out stuff during press conferences. He rambled and didn't know what he wanted to say.
I get that he's improved in those ways. I understand. This is a public speaker. He had never been a head coach before.
Sure.
I get that.
I think we're seeing a guy who no longer believes he has to prove anything to anyone. And he knows that what he is going to say is the right thing because he thinks it. And he also knows, I don't have to convince you of anything.
Less pressure.
You know what I mean? Like, he got challenged. They asked him, how many years are on your contract? It's pretty typical to not comment on that. But because they can sense, maybe I can find a weakness in Nick, I'm going to push you on it. I'm going to say, why aren't you answering? And he's going to say, because I don't want to.
So I think those are all fair points. And I do agree that it is advantageous for the team and Nick if he's not a distraction at the podium, obviously, right? I just hope that, like, I saw this with Doug, right? Doug won the Super Bowl in 2017, and clearly things did not go great for Doug as a coach after that, so it was different. But Doug, by the time he left in 2020, in my opinion, was so beaten down by, like, the city and the media and, like, the pressure. I think he was a different person. If you look at him in those press conferences compared to when he started, it was different. I don't want that to happen to Nick, where he feels when he goes up to the podium, I get you have to act a certain way, but I want him to remain himself.
All right. His starting quarterback won the Super Bowl.
That's a good point. I mean, it's a different.
It's a different.
Well, Doug going through that Carson Nick Foles thing was the craziest thing ever.
Doug had to live through that. Like, Doug had to navigate
and
that whole thing.
And that's part of it for sure, what Doug had to live through. I'm just, even like, you know, I think we can now look back and say what Nick did against the Browns really wasn't that bad, right?
Sure,
the guy was yelling.
I agree with
you know
that.
What I mean? But it feels like he still has to act based off that moment where people criticized him.
Not just that moment.
But I think that was the last one where people really lost it on
right.
Then
and then what happened?
And
they lost one more game the rest of the season after he had that moment, and everybody was like, and this came from, by the way, this wasn't fans.
Yeah, this is
came
up top
from
too.
Jeffrey Lurie and
yes.
Howie Roseman is like, we don't yell at the fans, our own fans at the sideline grow up. And from that, we can point to all the things that happened around that time. We can point to the meeting with the offensive line. We can point to the change with the offense. We can point to the defense getting better, all those things. But I don't think you can lose the fact that happened, and he discovered his organization was like, that's not who we are. And I think there is a point, what I see from Nick is a guy who has grown up on the job.
I agree with that.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. And he's figured out, I think, I understand what you're saying. I understand what you're saying. You want Nick to be Nick.
Because Nick
but who Nick is, I think, is probably different than who Nick was 4 or 5 years ago. And the other thing I'd say, comparing him to Doug, and there is nothing that can equal, I don't think, the controversy, the Carson Nick Foles controversy.
Yeah.
However, what happened in 2023, the quarterback publicly basically not backing him is a huge thing to deal with. And he navigated that, and Doug didn't. And I think Doug was a really good coach, but clearly Nick has an ability to grow and manage, like, the emotional intelligence of everything around him, has an emotional intelligence that I don't think Doug has.
I think Nick is very coachable. In a weird way, right? Like, I think he listens to the people around him. And I guess the last thing I'll say on this is I just think Nick has a personality that fans in this city gravitate to and, like, makes a connection with the fans. And I mean, look, Andy Reid, your coach, is a great example. Like, you guys talk about Andy off the podium like a completely different person than he was on the podium. And obviously, Andy's arguably, in my
the fans
opinion,
never connected.
And the fans never connected with Andy. But
never connected with him.
But if he thought that was advantageous to winning, it's hard for me to say no.
And he did.
And
By
he
the way,
did.
he did.
Well,
yes.
I think he's the best head coach of all time. So obviously, what he did worked. I'm just saying, I don't want to see Nick turn into a version of Andy on the podium, because I think who he is can really add to his legend in this city.
He got a little bit different personality than Coach Reid. He's a little bit more of a fiery, like that. And I think that works with today's players, by the way. I think
just one of the guys as opposed to
being one of the
taskmaster.
guys, not being so rigid in what you want and how you want things done, having the ability to listen to your players. I heard Jonesy on with the morning show this morning, just talking about the difference in coaching and how Tocchet may be, why he's a good hire for those guys, and sort of what you need to do to be a coach with today's. Now they're obviously speaking more about the NHL, but it's really today's athletes.
Yeah,
it's today's athletes.
Well, the college system seems to have changed that a lot too. The ability to
today's
leave,
athletes,
recruiting,
much smarter than we were, meaning that they have more information available to them. We just went and played. Coach tells you go play, they show you plays, you go and play. Over the last 10 years, players have taken a little bit more of an ownership of the leagues, of their teams.
They're more powerful.
Yes, and so coaches have to at least have the ability to embrace that. And it don't mean you let the players run the team and do what they want to do, but you certainly have to let them have a voice in what goes on.
You got to get them from point A to point B in a different way.
Yes.
You can't just tell them to do it. You have to find a way to get them to do it with them thinking it's their idea.
And by the way, I actually think that's the biggest difference between Doug and Nick. I think Nick is excellent at what you just said.
Yeah.
Like, I think Nick loves coaching and, like, the relationships part of the coaching. I just, like, Jalen at the podium. Jalen is who Jalen is at the podium. And he's probably very similar off the podium. Like the times I've been around Jalen, right? Similar.
Yeah.
But I also
you want him to show more personality at the podium, just like Nick?
What I'm saying, though, is like Jalen has a resume in 4 years as a starting quarterback, and he probably is the most popular athlete in the city regardless. But he should already be like extremely popular. I do think he is the most popular. Who do you think is more popular?
Saquon?
Maybe Saquon. Yeah. Maybe, but it's definitely no one on the Phillies, Sixers, or Flyers.
Well, definitely no one on the Phillies. I mean, the price is there.
Well, Bryce, I think it's how we measure popularity.
I think it's fallen behind Jalen's.
Maybe.
Maybe for the moment.
But what I'm trying to say is, I think that if Nick starts to act like Jalen at the podium, I get the reasoning for it. It would just be... I think it would be disappointing to see Nick kind of hide who he is more because of public criticism.
Can I make one final thing? We talk about the difference between you think people like Nick and like the way he is and didn't like Andy the way he was. If Andy had won the Super Bowl, and because think about Bill Belichick. Bill Belichick was a total jerk. Right. Never said anything. And everybody in New England thought he was the greatest thing in the world. If Andy Reid had won the Super Bowl, and to the other side, as much as we love Nick's personality, everybody wanted to fire Nick for 3 years.
For sure.
So like
3 years after the first 4 games last year,
they wanted
for
to fire
80% of his time as a coach.
And all they could talk about was like, why is this guy being such a buffoon all the time? Just coach the football team.
But
So
wouldn't that speak to be yourself because the results are all that matters? Like Belichick. He could have been
he's the example.
I get your point.
But it gives yourself.
I know what you're saying.
I think by handling it this way, it gives himself a little more leeway.
It makes his life easier. I would agree with that. It makes his life easier.
Belichick was fortunate.
Yes,
he got away with it being that way.
And by the way, look at how it's working out for Belichick once he got fired. Nobody hired him.
Exactly.
Right? And he's certainly going through his
At
own
least this
PR
gives
thing
Nick,
right now.
especially in a town like this, it doesn't hurt if we want to give you a little bit of rope.
Sure.
Give you a little bit of, give you a little bit of cushion versus jumping you. So I think this allows Nick to build that up with the fan base.
And the other thing is, if we're being honest, like, not a lot of athletes get rope in this city.
Yes.
I agree. If they
yes.
lose to the Cowboys 27-3 week one, it will not be they won the Super Bowl. Like some people will say that. But
I agree with that.
There's not a lot of rope. Yeah.
So we were doing our show meeting when Jalen spoke. The only quote I saw from Jalen, because I want to get your thoughts on what he said, the only quote I saw was somebody asked him about reflections on the Super Bowl, and he said, I am here to talk about the 25-26 Eagles.
It's QB1, man.
That's the problem when you don't talk to him for the 3 months since. But I think that was Jalen was himself today. He was very much himself, like focused on next season, focused on getting better. He talked about how in the building, I want to I'll paraphrase here, but basically there's a little more on his shoulder now. He's a veteran player. He's the quarterback. There's more responsibility. Dodge the White House question, I would say.
Somebody asked it?
I asked him about the White House.
That's our guy.
What'd you ask him?
I asked why he didn't go to the White House.
What did he say?
Honestly, I don't remember completely because I was so focused on looking and asking. But he basically said I was busy, but the people that went seemed like they had fun.
Here's what he had to say.
Jalen, how come you didn't go to the White House? Decision to not go to the White House?
I wasn't available. I don't think that's pertinent.
Well, it's definitely
and was available. They seemed to enjoy themselves.
You know who enjoyed himself was Eli Ricks, who was
Saquon.
Yeah, it's Saquon. Yeah, Eli Ricks and Saquon definitely had a good time.
Listen,
Got to walk in the locker room.
With that answer, nobody followed up.
Nope. Yeah.
No.
Well, listen, that's a great answer by him then.
Yeah.
He's like,
Jalen's great at controlling the press
I don't think that's
conference.
pertinent, really.
Well, because people are terrified.
Yeah, they're terrified of
He's
it.
an intimidating
Dude,
figure.
he bullies the big Jays and asking about the opposing team's defense. Like
Yeah.
he's ever going to say what they do on tape.
I wasn't available. It's not pertinent.
Not pertinent. Move on to the next question.
Yeah, well, at least, you
Listen,
know, to his
You
credit.
got, you got
AJ
the
talked
question
about
in
it.
there. You got it in
Yeah.
there. Nobody else did.
Well, it was interesting. AJ was asked about it and said he had a family thing that day, but his reasoning for going was not political or who was in the office.
Oh,
Okay.
wow.
Well,
Okay.
at least
that.
AJ gave you that.
Gave
Yeah.
you the answer.
I hadn't seen any of that on social media, so
yeah.
I'm surprised you brought that up. I'm like, oh, you did ask
Well,
the
it
question.
felt like the main question, but
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
See, this is why you're the insider.
Well, you know, the other ones
Right.
couldn't ask him because 90% of them didn't go because they were.
They didn't go.
Well, they decided not to do their job because they had to make some sort of statement. Speaking of AJ,
I
here.
forgot about
Oh,
that
yeah.
part.
Yeah, I'm not going to do my job today. I got rules about where I can do my job. Here's what AJ Brown had to say.
You were among a handful of Eagles who didn't go to the White House. Why didn't you go?
I had a personal reason I was dealing with that day, and so it wasn't about politics or who's in the office or anything. You know, I just had something personal going on with my family.
There you go.
Yes.
So
well, I think they got
all
out
the
of today
brothers, All the
without.
brothers on the team had something going on that day.
except for
Besides
Saquon.
Eli Ricks.
Eli Ricks.
It's a good day to have the YouTube up.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
I'm laughing because
Zach Bond?
because it's like the elephant in
No, I
the
don't think Bond
room,
was
but
there.
Yeah.
but
Bond
I'm
was there, wasn't
actually
he? I don't
happy.
think so.
Oh, yeah.
I'm actually happy that the question was asked and we can move on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Move on.
And that was kind of the tone of the day. It felt
Yes.
a lot like move on and
Yeah.
concentrate.
from it.
Yeah,
Well, I
yeah.
can imagine the Eagles PR guys looking at you.
Yeah.
You know,
But the
he's
flip
like,
side,
you saw who was there.
But the flip side
The
is
long
like,
snapper guy was there. You know, the one who retired.
he might have wanted a platform to explain why he didn't go.
Right.
You know,
Right.
Yeah,
For
no,
sure.
I'm
Yeah.
good.
Yeah,
Why
he
you give him the
can't-
platform, Elliot?
Yeah.
That's what I'm here for.
He needs a press conference for the platform. He
Yeah,
couldn't have said it
exactly.
there.
He needs me to ask to get his,
Right.
his message out.
Right.
That's like when Ike played and no
Yeah.
one had blogs or social media
Yeah.
or anything like that.
So we will learn tomorrow about the Tush Push. I, for some reason, Elliot,
Yeah.
am infuriated with the NFL for trying to eliminate this. They're lying about it, which is, I think, what bothers me the most. They're lying about player safety. They're lying about the thing that actually bothers me the most is not the player safety. It's that it's how it looks and it's an ugly play, as if a regular quarterback sneak is some magical
It looks
great
exactly
play to watch.
the same. It looks
And-
exactly the same.
and I would say
with a regular quarterback sneak, you're not getting pushed.
But
Yeah.
stylistically, I just think if you showed someone who had never seen football 20 plays, 10 were tush pushes and 10 were quarterback sneaks, one person wouldn't be like, the quarterback sneak looks way different.
Yeah, I just think
Like stylistically,
from an
you're
ath-
right. You're
from an
right, the push
aesthetic.
is different, but it's not like a
It
quarterback
does look
sneak.
different.
It's
Oh,
like a
come
quarterback sneak. He's
on.
running
There's
to the
6 people
sideline and
lined up
sprinting.
behind the quarterback pushing him.
Yeah, but I mean, in terms of
Once
entertainment
the play
value,
starts, it looks the same.
I actually
the pre-snap is different.
Well,
You're right.
I actually think the entertainment value of the Tush Push is now up because people are aware of what is happening. The thing, though, that drives me the most crazy is that people here, and I think mostly fans don't want it banned. I think everyone is mostly together on that.
Talking largely
Fans.
or Philly
no, to
fans?
Philly
Okay,
fans.
all right.
But I think generally the whole we'll be just as good without it is actually
Yeah, we will be.
but we won't, or they wouldn't do it. And it hurts their chance to win the Super Bowl next year.
Come on.
Well, no, it might not be. It's not like losing a starter, but like all of these things, we think about the one play here and one play there that end up winning the Super Bowl. Like one play here that wins this game
And this
that
is what I
gets
don't
them.
want to happen. This crutch for
Well,
the tush push.
And what
This
is
crutch, and now we're not going to win because they took away the tush
What
push.
is going to happen, though, if they don't convert on a 3rd and 1 or 4th and 1 in a
Yep.
big game,
Yeah.
like everyone will be like, they would have gotten it for the tush push, if not for the tush push. Now, I agree.
Oh, we're not going to blame.
So,
we're not going to blame that we allowed penetration pause in the A gap there, right? Right.
Something tells me that won't be the talking point from the callers if I
A
had
lot
to
of
guess.
penetration talk
Yeah.
about the gay guy.
Yeah.
So I agree that they'll be fine without it, but what it sets up is that anytime they don't convert one, people will believe they would have converted if it was a Tush Push.
Yes.
So let's say they play the Packers.
Wah.
But the other thing that is an absolute
The other teams are the babies.
right, they're
The Packers are the babies.
They are babies too. I
By the
agree.
way,
Yes.
I agree. They are babies too.
I think
agree.
Nick knows it's gone, by the way. Did you hear Nick today?
Oh, yeah.
He didn't even want to talk about it.
Well, he said
Yeah.
it'll be public tomorrow.
Yeah. Well,
I think
here's
the phrasing of it'll be public tomorrow implies privately they know the answer.
Well, here's the thing. I'm just saying, life goes on from the Tush Push.
Well,
We
you probably
talked
like
about
AJ's
Donovan
answer.
throwing up in the
Forward.
Super Bowl for 20 years. We can
That's
talk.
a low blow.
Well, I'm just saying.
And I got a debate about Donovan and Jalen. I don't need you and your throwing up in the Super Bowl.
What I'm saying is, if you think I'm just going to forget about it because the ruling is tomorrow.
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Well,
Did
no,
you
I
hear-
agree with that.
did you
yeah.
hear AJ's
listen,
answer?
Listen, we hold on to everything.
Yes,
Yeah. I agree with that.
So here's my question, and maybe so I'm looking at the Packers proposal.
Yes.
And here is the thing that is confusing to me, which if I was another team, I don't know if I would want to vote for this. So it's Article 4D. It says, no offensive player may assist the runner except by individually blocking opponents for him. Individually. So does that mean me and another player cannot block an opponent because we're not doing it individually?
So I
No.
think you could perceive it, but I don't think that's what it means.
Then what
I
does
think
it
just
mean?
means the individual is blocking. Like if there's two, let's say
individually meaning I can only block. I
like,
can't
I don't
push
think you
a
can
player.
link arms together
Yeah.
or whatever.
Got
I
it.
think
Okay.
It doesn't mean you can't run a double team block.
Exactly.
Yes, that's what it read
Each
like.
person
Yeah,
is
it
doing
does not
an
mean that.
individual
Yeah.
thing. But the other thing on the Tush Push, to aid your point about how unfair it is, we should just be honest and say if the Eagles were 4-12 or 4-13 last year, this would not be a discussion.
Of course not.
Because it was not a discussion after 2023 when they tanked.
That
and didn't
works
win a
both
playoff.
ways, though, E.
But I'm saying that
You wouldn't be fighting for it either if the Eagles didn't win the Super Bowl. If they were 4-12, how many people would be fighting for it?
But there would be nothing to fight for. Like
No,
they
no.
would not be coming for the play. I get your point.
No, my
but
point is that let's say people were opposed to it. How many people would be in support of it if the Eagles were 4-12?
You're right that people would not be lining the streets mad that Tush Push is being taken
Exactly.
away. But there would be nothing to protest against. So I just think that that's where I agree with Spike. I do actually believe some people firmly believe in player safety as a reason. Now we can point to the stats and everything. I just hate the lying about it's a rugby play, like an aesthetic thing. That is strictly just their way to get it out. Because I don't think it matters if they think it's aesthetically pleasing.
Yeah,
No,
but
yeah,
here's the thing I say. I mean, listen. It was a play that was banned 20 years ago. I don't remember people clamoring to be able to push people in the end zone.
So did they?
So they changed the rule mistakenly, not thinking it would lead to this.
Right. And that
was their issue. That's the league's problem. They should have never opened this up for it to be this
the
way.
Eagles found a loophole in
Yes.
a rule.
Which is why I respect it
and
so
I do
much.
think, yes. I mean,
Yeah.
I've said I think it's going to help Nick Sirianni's Hall of Fame case, that he's going to be the only head coach that designed a play
How
that
about
got.
winning the Super Bowl helps?
Well,
his
that
case?
helped too. But I mean, he's already on the trajectory. But how many head coaches can say they designed a play that the league had to ban?
Did
All
he
right.
design it?
He's a head coach.
There it is. All right, coming up next. So it's debate days on WIP. And for the second half of Tuesdays with Eliot, we're going to go through some of Eliot's most fiery,
Oh, yeah.
the
Nice.
opinions that started the most fiery debates.
Well, I did enjoy Ike versus Joe.
Yeah,
Especially Ike had an uphill battle. With
Yes.
Seriously uphill
Yeah,
battle.
yeah, you
Hold
did
on,
well.
but how did I battle, though?
Well, I thought you won.
There it is.
Boom, there you go.
Yeah,
That's
come
my
on.
guy.
There it
Easy
is.
vote.
My
It's
guy
not because
right
he's looking
there.
at you.
What?
Yeah.
Ike versus clickbait? Come
Well,
on.
no. I mean, yeah. I mean, Julia's out there. I don't want it anymore. He didn't have any reasons.
There's no reason. There's no depth to that argument.
No, get him out of here. All right, it's the WIP.
I want out of the Embiid business.
Well,
everyone does, to be
What's
fair.
the deal?
Yeah, guys,
He's right, but he
120
was
pounds soaking wet over there trying to argue about sports. How could you even
never played
respect this
basketball.
I
opinion?
feel bad for anybody that comes in here, man.
All right, it's the WIP afternoon show with Ike, Spike, and Fritz.